Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to the Bill Frantz Show. We have an excellent show for you today.
We are going to meet Alderman Scott Ogilvie from the St. Louis City, Ward 24. He is going to talk about
Proposition P. And we will also have Bryan Edwards doing commentary, speaking about Hugo Chavez. You need to stay tuned for that because Bryan...
Welcome to the Bill and Frantz Show. We've got a special guest today, Alderman Scott Ogilvie of Ward 24 of the City of St. Louis.
Yes, I'm the representative for the Dogtown and Clifton Heights neighborhoods.
Okay, and coming up real soon is the election for the City of St. Louis. One of the big things is the Proposition P, which is to renovate the grounds for the St. Louis Arch, among other things.
Right, so it's the Arch Grounds, Parks, and Trails proposition. And what it basically is, it's a sales tax increase. There's two votes, one vote in St. Louis City, one vote in St. Louis County. They'll both happen on Tuesday, April 2nd. And if it passes in both, it has to pass in both to go into effect, there'll be a 3/16% increase in the sales tax. And that money gets divvied up to a couple different agencies. It's about a third, not exactly, but close. And a third goes to parks in the region, St. Louis City, St. Louis County. A third goes to Great Rivers Greenway, which is the regional trail building agency that's been working on the off-street bike trails. And then there's the Arch Grounds project. And that's gotten the most press, for sure. It would send about $150 million over 20 years to the Arch Grounds project, and that would basically accelerate the plans that are in place to change a lot of elements at the Arch Grounds and around it, from the river basically into Keener Plaza downtown.
Okay. Now you'll notice that was a much more specific description than this little handout that went to all the St. Louis residents, I presume. I certainly got one in the mail. Even more, well, what are the pros and cons?
Pros and cons. I'll start with the part I'm most enthusiastic about,
okay,
and that is the Great Rivers Greenway Trails portion. GRG was created about 11 years ago, and they already operate with a little sliver of sales tax money, and this would almost double the money they get, and it would basically allow them to build this regional trail network more quickly. And trails people are familiar with, that they might have ridden on or heard about, are trails like the River to Pear Trail, the North Riverfront Trail, St. Vincent Greenway, but there's trails all throughout the region in City, County, and St. Charles. I'm a big bicycle advocate, and I think building that network more quickly is good.
Sounds good
in
so
the middle, you have the Parks Initiative. There has not been a lot of conversation about what the priorities would be for the city and county parks, but there would be an increase in funding for parks in the city and St. Louis County. That's probably, I think, a more pertinent issue in the county, where the last couple of years they've really had some difficulties funding the park network, and there were, the county executive, Charlie Dooley, considered really closing down some parks temporarily to save money. Then you've got the Arch Grounds. Now, there's been a lot of plans for the Arch Grounds over decades, none of which have really come to fruition. We're there. There's going to be action at the Arch Grounds, whether this tax passes or not.
Okay.
There's already about $100 million in place for building the lid over Interstate 70. It'll connect downtown to the Arch Grounds, so you're going to get a one-block lid that you can walk across.
Okay.
So you don't have to cross 70 and Memorial. We're going to spend about $30 or $40 million rebuilding Lenore K. Sullivan, which is the street down along the riverfront, raising it and completely rebuilding it basically as a boulevard for pedestrians, cyclists, and cars.
And to be clear, this is stuff that's already paid for before Proposition P.
Exactly. And I think that's a key distinction that has not really worked its way into a lot of the coverage of this, that City Arch River, the group that has been pushing Proposition P, has already rounded up about $100 million from different sources to do those two components of the project. What the tax would do is it would allow additional components to happen in the next couple of years. And those are things like tearing down the garage that's on the north end of the Arch grounds, rebuilding that area, changes to Keener Plaza area, and also a bunch of work inside the Arch grounds for trail network and the ponds that are there. And then a big private initiative, which is actually mostly separate from the tax itself, is to expand the museum that's underneath the arch and build a new entrance to that museum that faces west, that faces downtown, rather than having the entrance kind of at the leg of the arch where it is right now. But that museum expansion is going to be primarily funded through private donations, so that's probably going to move ahead, tax increase or no tax
Independent
increase.
of Prop P again.
Independent, yeah. And so this is, you know.
Can I just interject
Sure.
for a second? I'm not sure, but the thing that jumped out at me initially when you described some of these things was the taking down of the garage and building it again. That reminds me of Busch Stadium and Yankee Stadium and perhaps Kingdome in Seattle and things like that.
Yeah, that's really when we were debating this, that garage is an element that I used as an example of where I think some of this tax is going to go for expenditures that I don't consider to be priorities. That garage is not very old, and it actually generates revenue. It's owned by Metro. It actually generates revenue for Metro, and so I would be okay with not spending the money to tear that garage down. You know, there's been a planning process that's gone on for a couple of years, and those elements were put in the plan. If the tax passes, they will happen. If the tax does not pass, I think there'll be a reevaluation probably of certain expenditures, like taking that garage down.
What are the other? I mean, that sticks out to me. But how much of a percentage of this proposition is that? I mean, I'm just trying. I don't want to be too negative on one detail. In other words,
I don't have the exact dollar figure. Okay. That's in the tens of millions because they're going to remove that garage. And then they won't build a new garage there. What they'll do is that'll become new park space instead of the 1,200 parking spaces.
Which is appealing.
Yeah, and that's the reason the primary reason they're doing that is that the National Park Service, which owns the Arch Grounds is a national park like Yellowstone. They're very strict on changing the design of the Arch Grounds itself, but that garage was not original to the early 1960s design when they completed the arch, so they allowed that area of the park to change.
And they want to go back to a more pure park? Is that the idea?
It'll be, there'll be paths through there, it'll be like a garden space, and they'll have, I think, an area for gatherings or like small performances, that type of thing. That might be the part of the park where you'll see the most change, but you know, as a taxpayer, that's also sort of one of the problematic parts for me, is that we're spending money to eliminate something that generates money for Metro in order to, you know, rebuild this. So that's where I sort of focused some of my criticisms of this while we were debating it.
You said a lot of the changes are already going to happen independent of Prop P. The changes that are unique to Proposition P, do you think, budgetarily wise, will that tax cover them? Those unique Prop P changes?
Yeah, the revenue generated from the tax would pay for them.
Okay.
The size of the tax was kind of designed to make sure it was big enough to pay for the elements that were planned for the last couple of years. So it will cover the cost of those. City Arch River is also already embarking on a very substantial effort to raise private money for this project, primarily focused on that museum expansion, but some of the private money will be spent for other elements of the design as well.
Okay, well, thanks. So we'll take a break right now. We'll see you right back.
Great.
Tacos, tacos, tacos. We're celebrating Latin America today, and specifically we're talking about El Presidente Hugo Chavez, the former and now fallen late president of Venezuela. Now, as we know, no one eats tacos in Venezuela unless they're eating Mexican food. Tacos are not Venezuelan. However, apparently a lot of people on the right have been yammering over the past week or so about Hugo Chavez's death. The dictator Hugo Chavez, communist dictator Hugo Chavez, socialist dictator Hugo Chavez, president of Venezuela, dictator Hugo Chavez. Thank you, right wing. Thank you for showing us that you know nothing about world events. And if I actually assumed all of the information that you did, I might hold your positions, but I actually go after the facts. So let's talk about Hugo Chavez, God rest his soul, former president of Venezuela. Start with dictator. What is a dictator? I got this here dictionary. It's a dictionary that's going to tell me about what a dictator is. A dictator is apparently, according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, pocket version, a dictator is a person who rules absolutely and often brutally and oppressively. Well, dictators don't get elected. Hugo Chavez, 3 times elected. 3 times. The United Nations monitored the elections. Jimmy Carter, a former president of the United States of America, Jimmy Carter was one of the monitors. What was determined? They were free and fair elections. Why do we call him a dictator? And why do the right-wingers and their followers of lack of information, fact-free analysis, why do they call him a dictator and post all of these silly things on Facebook and speak abundantly on AM radio? Why do they call him a dictator? Because they don't like him. It doesn't have to be the truth. They don't like him. He's got a lot of oil. We need the oil. We got a lot of cars. He speaks bombastically. That is, Hugo Chavez spoke bombastically about the United States. He was a little bit megalomaniacal. Yes, he was full of himself. He had a Sunday TV show called Allo Presidente, which means, hello, President. And he spoke for hours and hours. He was idiosyncratic. However, he fed the poor and he housed the poor. And he took some of the wealth of the nation from the oil fields to feed the poor. He was, in fact, a president, not a dictator. A president, elected. So, do we like dictators in the United States? We say we don't. But we loved Shah Pahlavi until 1979 as the Shah of Iran, a dictator. We installed Pinochet in Chile after we helped to kill and train those who killed Salvador Allende, the president of Chile. We also liked the former president of Egypt. For the last 30 years, gave him billions and billions and hundreds of billions of dollars. So if a dictator functions in the United States' interest, boy, does the right wing like him. If a democratically elected president does not function in the United States' interest, or at least the interest of the moneyed elite and those who follow them, the right-wingers, he's a dictator. And if you think Hugo Chavez was a dictator, you probably think Venezuelans eat tacos. Evening.
All right, welcome back to the Bill and Frantz Show. Here we are in the Board of Alderman chambers at the St. Louis City Hall.
Yep, this is where we meet Fridays, where this is sort of where the sausage is made, so to speak. This is where we take votes and, I guess, make the laws that apply to St. Louis.
I didn't realize it was just once a week.
Yeah, just Friday. Committee meetings happen during the week, but not in this room. And the full Board of Aldermen meets Friday mornings here. And we'd love to have guests, so feel free to come down if it's a snow day at work. You can come down here and sit in the balcony and watch what we do.
I have done that once a few years ago. We sat in the balcony. It's very interesting. Anyway, you as a representative of Ward 24 are will soon be introducing a new campaign finance, what is hoped will someday be a law. We can't call it a bill yet. Right.
So when we start next session, in a couple weeks, I'll have a law that will regulate local campaign donations. So right now, the situation in St. Louis is pretty unique. That we have no limits on campaign contributions. So any donor can give an unlimited amount of money to any candidate. And that's unusual. 46 states cap contribution limits for each donor. And then in those 4 states, many of the cities do it on their own if their state doesn't do it. So Kansas City, for instance, if you're running for mayor in Kansas City, the most amount of money you can get from a single donor is $3,000. In New York City, a city of 8 million people, it's $5,000. In St. Louis, you can get as much money as a donor will give you, hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases. And we just went through a mayoral election where one of the candidates did, in fact, receive hundreds of thousands of dollars from a single donor. And so when I talk to, I think, the average voter, they see a big flaw with that system. They feel like those big donors really tip the scales, tip the playing field kind of away from your average person or somebody who wants to make a contribution of $50 and towards this very small number of people who can make these big contributions.
This is a classic problem in American democracy.
It is, and it's, I think, something that has it's gotten worse probably in the last 10 or 15 years.
Absolutely.
And Missouri actually had limits until 2008.
Oh, I didn't know.
There was a state limit that applied also to cities, and so it was a pretty restrictive limit. And the Missouri legislature got rid of that law in 2008. So, and instead of changing the law to something maybe less restrictive, they just got rid of it completely and said there's no limits. So since 2008 to now, 5 years, we've operated in an environment of unlimited contributions. And it would be great if the state legislature would fix that problem for us, but they haven't fixed it yet. So I think we need to fix it for St. Louis, for ourselves, whether they do it or not.
Well, one thing it's doing is it's supporting the United States Postal Service.
That's that's a good point. You probably get 2 or 3 times the amount of campaign literature in the mail that you want to get.
Have you picked a number for the threshold?
Yeah. Well, the numbers my opening offer is going to be $10,000 for the mayor from each donor, and also Board of Alderman president and comptroller citywide offices $10,000. And then for individual aldermen, $3,000. So the idea is not that you can't raise money to run a campaign. You do need money to run a campaign and to communicate with people. But you want to set the limit so you can raise enough money to do it, but not so you can get these kind of absurd levels of contributions from a few donors. So that's the goal. I think the average citizen of St. Louis, resident, the vast majority will support something like this. And the challenge might be just getting it through the Board of Aldermen. But I think a lot of colleagues who I've already talked to do support it. So I'm optimistic right now that we'll be able to get this passed.
I think that's campaign finance is something that is, as we said before, an important problem in American democracy. Yeah,
it is. It's the citizens.
Citizens United.
Citizens United. That's for federal elections, but we've sort of been operating under that type of system since 2008 here. That federal elections have just recently started operating under, and it's just it's a law it's a rule that just does not make sense to the vast majority of regular people.
Yeah. All righty. Anyway, thanks. If you have anything else to say, or.
Nope. Thanks for having me on the show, Bill. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott.
Great.
Have a good day.